The Republican Attorney General in the state of Texas is using the law to try to force a woman with a non-viable pregnancy to give birth, despite a risk to her life. And if that sounds hyperbolic, it's not. That's what's happening right now, tonight, to Kate Cox, a 31-year-old mother of two who was forced to beg a Texas court for an emergency abortion once she discovered that her fetus had a fatal genetic condition. Her doctor warned her that her health and her ability to have more children would be at risk if she did not terminate the pregnancy. The judge agreed that she met the medical requirements to obtain an abortion, even in Texas, even under the state's restrictive ban, calling it a miscarriage of justice to force her to continue with a non-viable and potentially harmful pregnancy. But that was not enough for the Texas Republican Attorney General. Ken Paxton, a man who we can talk about at length another night, is threatening in writing to prosecute any hospital that performs an abortion on this woman. Today, Paxton asked the Texas Supreme Court to intervene.
Before we went through this, I never imagined that we would be in this position. You know, I've said I never thought I would ever need or want an abortion. I always wanted a big family. I think forcing me to continue the pregnancy and the pain and suffering put me through the risks of continuing the pregnancy, the risks of childbirth again, especially given how my last two went. I think it's cruel.
It is cruel. It's dystopian. This is Handmaid's Tale stuff. A woman, already a mother, pregnant with a wanted child, dealing with a terrible and frightening prognosis, has the Republican Attorney General and Republican activists in Texas overriding the advice of her doctor. Texas's anti-abortion law is already being challenged in court by 20 Texas women who say the state ban puts their lives in danger by denying them medically necessary abortions. This is the post-Roe world created by Republicans. Voters have repeatedly shown they do not want these extreme near-total abortion bans with little or no exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother, even in red states. Kansas, Kentucky, Ohio. But Republicans will not be stopped by mere voters. This week, New Hampshire Republicans proposed a 15-day, yeah, you heard that right, that's not a misprint, a 15-day abortion ban. The New Republic reports, quote, that a mere 1 day after medical experts say detection is even possible via store-bought tests post-conception. House Bill 1248 FN would also tack on criminal penalties to any health care providers caught performing abortions, categorizing the offense as a Class B felony and potential fines ranging from $10,000 to $100,000, end quote. Might actually pass, by the way. This bill might actually pass, even though an overwhelming majority of New Hampshire voters support keeping abortion legal, as is the case in America. The Associated Press reports that in Missouri, Republicans have introduced bills to be considered in the legislative session that begins next month to apply homicide laws on behalf of a victim who is an unborn child at every stage of development, end quote, every stage of development. Consider this a reminder as we head into 2024. Elections have consequences, and today voters in one state are finally getting the protections that they voted for. A ballot initiative to enshrine abortion rights in Ohio's state constitution is in effect today after voters resoundingly voted to protect a woman's right to bodily autonomy, overriding the state's abortion ban. Of course, Ohio Republicans are still appealing this in court. Joining us now is Dr. Lauren Bean, co-founder and executive director of Ohio Physicians for Reproductive Rights. Dr. Bean, thank you for being with us. Even in Ohio, this was no sure thing. It was 2 votes. I mean, there was finally a referendum to get this done, but it was 2 votes. There was like a tricky vote to start with, and then having not succeeded in that, the anti-abortion forces changed the methodology for the actual vote. And yet Ohioans took to the polls, maybe in some cases put some of their personal beliefs about abortion aside and held up the fundamental belief that don't take my rights away from me as an American.
Absolutely, Ali. The people of Ohio came out and voted very resoundingly in support of the people making their own reproductive health care decisions. And, the impact of that goes far beyond just issue one. I mean, it's really a statement by the people of Ohio that medical decisions, including reproductive health care decisions, including those involving abortion, should be made by people in consultation with their medical provider. And they should not be made by government officials, politicians, extremists, like the extremists that are running many of our state governments. Because when those extremists try to take over and try to make those decisions for people, the people suffer, people get hurt, and people die. And the people realize that, right? And they know that they want to make their own healthcare decisions. So in Ohio, we saw that just like we did in several states in 2022, where the people came out, and they've come out over and over again now saying, hey, I want to make my own healthcare decisions. I don't want my extremist politicians making them for me.
And one of the interesting things here is that for some people, when Roe fell, it was an abstraction, the idea that the states will be okay. And then we found out that states can be quite draconian and that your rights are actually being taken away. Ultimately, in Ohio and in other places, in Kansas, in other states, there were activists on the ground making sure people did it, but people answered the call. They came out and said, I will vote to protect not just my rights, your rights.
Yes, more than that. People came out at the beginning. So shortly after Roe fell, our organization formed. So I'm one of the co-founders and executive directors of Ohio Physicians for Reproductive Rights, which did not exist before Roe fell. But within days after Roe, over 1,000 doctors came together, all with the same belief that our patients need to be able to get the health care that they need when they need it. And it can't be something that we have to call up attorneys and ask for permission for. We can't have to go to judges to get permission like just happened in Texas. And that was the beginning of really a momentous landslide grassroots effect that has continued to build momentum throughout the last year and a half in Ohio and is now continuing into other states across the country. We had such an incredible volunteer enthusiasm. We had a tremendous amount of participation in collecting the signatures that were required to get abortion on the ballot in Ohio. We submitted over 710,000 signatures in order to get our petition on the ballot in a record amount of time. And then we had like a couple million people come out and vote and say, yes, I want to be able to make those decisions for myself. So absolutely, the people spoke, and they'll continue to speak in other states as well.
Dr. Lauren Bean, I appreciate your time, and thank you for the work that you've done. Dr. Lauren Bean is a pediatrician and the co-founder and executive director of Ohio Physicians for Reproductive Rights.